All right, let's get right into it. Back in 2016, a couple of researchers from Google Brain, Barrett Zoff and Kwok Lei, dropped a paper that completely changed the way we think about building AI. They asked this really simple but totally revolutionary question: what if an AI could design another AI? And what if it could do it better than any human ever could? Now, to really get why this was such a big deal, you have to picture what the world of deep learning looked like back then. Designing a top-tier neural network was kind of like a black art. It was this super slow, painful process that was all about the gut feelings and experience of a very, very small group of experts. So the core idea in their paper was to just flip that whole way of thinking on its head. Instead of having people painstakingly handcraft these super complex digital brains, what if we could just automate the whole thing? What if we could build an AI whose one and only job was to be the ultimate neural network architect? So let's set the stage a little bit and really look at the roadblock the entire field was running into before this paper came along. Think about it. Every major leap forward, from AlexNet to ResNet, came from a brilliant new human-designed architecture. But that was a huge constraint, right? Progress could only move as fast as these few experts could dream up new ideas and test them out. The design process itself was holding back the entire field of AI. And this is where Zoff and Lei rolled out their radical solution, a concept that would soon be known everywhere as Neural Architecture Search, or NAS for short. Okay, so what is NAS really? Well, at its heart, it's a form of meta-learning, which is a fancy way of saying it's learning how to learn. You have one neural network, they called it the controller, that learns how to spit out the design specs for a second network, the child network. The controller isn't learning to spot cats in photos, it's learning the very art of good network design. So how on earth does this actually work in practice? Well, the best way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like a master architect training an apprentice. It all works in this really clever feedback loop. You can see it right here. First, the controller, that's our master architect, proposes a design. Second, a child network, our apprentice, is actually built and trained based on that blueprint. Third, they measure its accuracy on a test. Fourth, that accuracy score turns into a reward signal. And fifth, that reward is used to update the controller, teaching it to come up with even better designs next time. This reward gets fed back to the controller using a reinforcement learning algorithm called reinforce. But you don't need to worry about the fancy name. It's pretty simple, really. If the child network did well, the controller is basically told, "Awesome job, that was a good design, try more stuff like that." If it did poorly, the feedback is, "Yeah, that didn't work, try something totally different." Round and round it goes, and with each cycle, the controller gets better and better at its job. And this diagram here, it really lays out that whole feedback loop beautifully. You've got the controller RNN on the left, essentially spitting out a recipe of hyperparameters. That recipe then defines and builds the child network. Then that child network gets trained and tested, and its performance, its accuracy, is fed right back as a reward signal to the controller. It's this perfect self-improving circle. Now, this was not some tiny experiment running on a single computer. To make this loop run fast enough to be practical, the team used a massive amount of computational power. We're talking 800 different child networks being trained in parallel on 800 GPUs. Yeah, it was a brute force approach, but it was absolutely necessary to explore the gigantic universe of possible architectures. So, the million-dollar question. After all this time and all this computing power, did it actually work? Was the AI architect any good at its job? The results were, to put it mildly, stunning. On the famous CFAR-10 image benchmark, the best human-designed architecture at the time, DenseNet, had an error rate of 3.74%. The architecture discovered by NAS? It got an error rate of 3.65%. It wasn't just close, it was officially better. This was a historic moment, and the data tells the whole story. For the very first time, an architecture generated entirely by an algorithm had set a new state-of-the-art record. It outperformed years and years of human expertise and intuition on a major benchmark. The apprentice had surpassed the master. And get this, it wasn't just a one-trick pony for image recognition. They pointed the same method at language modeling. The goal this time was to design a brand new recurrent cell, which is kind of the fundamental building block for networks that handle text. And the result? It discovered a cell that outperformed the legendary LSTM and set another new state-of-the-art record. Just incredible. So, you see, this one paper from 2016 wasn't just some clever trick. It was the spark that ignited an entirely new subfield in AI. You can draw a straight line from this paper to the rise of what we now call automated machine learning, or AutoML. That core idea, automating the design of models, is now the foundation of platforms like Google Cloud AutoML, which lets people who aren't deep learning PhDs build their own state-of-the-art models. And that right there is the paper's true legacy. It kicked off the democratization of AI design. For a company, this meant you no longer had to try and hire one of the few dozen elite researchers in the world to build a custom model. It opened the doors for so many more people to create amazing things, and it shifted our work from being the architects to being the managers of the architects.
Ultimately, the most important thing about neural architecture search wasn't just a new high score on a leaderboard, it was a profound shift in how we see things. The paper showed us that we can move up a level of abstraction. Instead of designing models ourselves, we could design algorithms that design the models for us. And that really begs the question, what other parts of the creative process can we teach machines to master? This is for entertainment purposes only.